Welcome back, Immigrant Nation. Another week, another new episode. I am your host, Aaron Deliosa, and this is An Immigrant's Life podcast. An Immigrant's Life on all your social media. Thank you for joining us, whether you are new here or a long-time listener. I appreciate you. I hope you like what you're hearing, and I hope you'll subscribe. I had such a great weekend this past weekend. I took my youngest kid to get a haircut, and we tried this new place. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of this place, but it was cheap. We came there early. We sat there. No one said hi to us. No one even asked us why we're there. We just sat there and just stared at people. And we waited for 30 minutes and it sucked. The haircut was all right, to be honest. Nothing special, but I don't know. The good thing is it's cheap. You know, being an immigrant, it's got to be the price, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I don't know if I want to come back. My kid said he doesn't mind coming back. So, whatever. After that, I took him for lunch. We went to grab burgers. I like when I take him out. We always have a great conversation. He asks great questions. He actually asked one question that I don't remember what it was, but it was such a great question I couldn't answer it. I love when he asks me questions that I cannot answer because it pushes me to search and, I could learn more. After that, we went home and just chilled the whole day. And then Sunday, we finally went on a first bike ride with my friend. And I felt like the world is right again. It was a great bike ride. 35 kilometers, not so much. We're starting to work ourselves to our biking shape. But it was a beautiful day. A little bit windy, to be honest. But overall, I loved it. I loved it. Enough of my gallivanting and adventuring. Let's talk about this week's episode, shall we? Today, we have a guest who is a second-generation immigrant embarking on a journey of self-discovery through his film documentary, Outsiderness. Formerly an avid world traveler, he now seeks to uncover his true sense of belonging. We delve into his experiences growing up in a Filipino household while navigating a white world, exploring topics such as identity, white privilege, and the quest for representation in media. Discover his poignant anecdotes and his aspiration to bridge generational and cultural gaps, fostering a deeper sense of belonging and connection. We had such an insightful conversation, and I know you will take away something valuable from it. So, let's not waste more time. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is a documentary filmmaker that's trying to explore his own roots while striving to make a positive impact in our society. Everyone, please welcome Carlo Alcos.
Hey, good to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming on, my man. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you reaching out to me and expressing interest in my project. It's very cool.
Hell yeah, dude. I saw your account. I'm like, this dude is cool. And guess what's going to happen? He's coming on the podcast.
Nice. And here we are. We made it happen.
We did. I love it. Before we get into the chismis part, why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you or if you want to promote anything?
Sure. I have a website, carloalcos.com, carloalcos.com. And in terms of the project that I'm working on, I have an Instagram account at outsiderness_doc. That's DOC. And I'm also doing a bit of blogging on Substack, which is outsiderness.substack.com.
Perfect.
Oh, I guess one more thing I'll mention. I am also on Instagram at Carlo_Alcos.
I love it.
There's a few ways.
Yeah, I mean, just type in Carlo Alcos, you'll show up.
That's right. Google me.
For sure. Substack. I love your blogs, dude. Well written.
Thank you.
I love it's like Timbits,
Thanks. Yeah, they're meant to. I mean, one for me. I don't want to sit there writing forever, so they're pretty quick hits. And also, I know for readers that they don't want to. It's hard to hold attention for super long these days. So I like the snack sized little bits. Yeah, for sure.
I used to write blogs too. When remember Friendster?
I don't know if I never used was that was before Facebook. I don't think I used
Yeah.
Friendster.
You
I
just
never
told me I'm
did.
old.
No, I'm old myself. I just don't think I was probably a late adopter. Yeah.
Oh, because it was
Can I ask
the
how old you are?
I am 41.
Okay, I beat you. I'm 48.
Well, good that you beat me. Let's keep it that way, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not going to call you old, trust me.
But no, yeah, it was like Friendster was like the Facebook, like it was very famous in the Philippines. I don't know in Asia, and there's like a part of it that you can write blogs or whatnot. And I used to write
Mm,
stuff there, and like I said, I used to write a lot, but then I got lazy.
yeah, it happens.
Okay, because of your project Outsiderness, which is I would love to talk about later on.
hmm
Is that the reason why you start writing again, or have you been thinking of writing?
No, that is why. So I used to I started out in media as a writer in 2008-ish or so. I was doing a lot of traveling at that time with my ex-wife, and we were living in Australia actually at the time, and had just finished some traveling in Europe and Asia, and I just found this website, a travel website that I started reading their articles, and I just had a thought come to my mind, like I could totally do that, and so I just started writing articles, and then I started sending them in, and one got accepted, then another, and it kind of snowballed from there. I got brought on as an editor at some point. And then I ended up working for that company for like 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said traveling. What kind of traveling were you doing? It was just like travel to travel, or you're trying to find home?
Travel to travel, mate. Basically, I mentioned my ex-wife. She was German. She is German. She's still alive. Yeah, she was a big traveler. We met in Canada, and I had done like a little bit of traveling before we met, but not like I'd been to Europe once with a friend, just on a month long. It's like your classic late 20s, go to Europe with a friend, buy a Eurail pass kind of trip. Um, trying to see way too many things in a short amount of time, and not really seeing anything because of that. So yeah, after we met, we were really into traveling, and then we went to traveling a lot. We would base ourselves in Europe, in Germany, in her hometown where her mom lived, and a couple times we bought a camper van and we drove around, mostly Western Europe, for weeks, months at a time. Yeah, and then the biggest trip after that was we went to Russia and spent a month traveling across Russia on the train, on the Trans-Siberian rails. And then we went south into Mongolia, and then stayed there for a bit, traveled around China for a while, Vietnam, and then made our way to Australia, where I lived for 2 years.
Wow. How were you guys making money?
We'd saved up a lot. I spent a lot of time working. I spent the majority of my 20s and early 30s working for TELUS. So it was a nice corporate gig, unionized, and it was very secure, and I was making decent money, and things were a lot less expensive in those days too, like late 90s, early 2000s. So the rent was fairly, even though we were living in, places like Kitsilano and Vancouver, which is, unreachable nowadays, I think, but we were paying relatively low rent there. And yeah, we just managed to save up. We sold our car at one point to help save up, started taking the bus. And so we made sacrifices, and just had a nest egg, I guess. And we traveled.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about your background a little bit. I
Sure.
understand that your parents was from the Philippines, moved to the States, and then moved to
Uh,
Canada.
they didn't move to the States, but they went to the States first because I can't remember the exact connection at this moment, but it's like I think my mom's mom had a friend or something in California. And so it was just a way they went to North America to start there. And then I think there was a lawyer that was involved, like an immigration lawyer. And I think it seemed for them a better option to immigrate to Canada or Australia, because I think the times to get in were much like the waits were much shorter. So they applied to Canada and Australia, and Canada just was the first to accept them. So I guess I could have been Australian if that didn't work out like that, but it did.
Well, you were Australian for 2 years.
For 2 years, yeah. That must be that. Maybe that's why it was calling to me at the time.
Probably.
Yeah,
I understand that mom and dad moved to Canada, left the three of your brothers, three older
yeah.
brothers
I
in
have
the
three older
Philippines.
brothers. Yeah, yep,
Once they settled, they bring them in, and then you little bugger showed up.
yep.
How much was the difference between the age between you and the closest one?
The next one to me is 6 years, and then 8 years and 10 years. So they're. I was an afterthought. I was a mistake. I'll just say it.
You're what did
Or
they say?
a surprise, not a mistake.
What did they say in the Philippines? They say menopause baby. That's what they say.
Oh yeah, like fake menopause baby or something, or
I don't know why they say that, but that's what they used to say. I remember growing up. It was. Is there friction between the three and you being you're the Canadian boy and they're the
uh,
Filipinos?
no, no, I don't. No, I never experienced that. I think the any friction, and I mean certainly no friction these days, but maybe when we were younger, I think the only friction at that time would have been because I was such the baby of the family that I was really babied by my parents, and so I would have been favored for certain things, like if there was a little bit of this is a classic one that's always a joke between my brothers and I. But if there was only a little bit of milk left for cereal, like it was like saved with a note on it in the fridge, like save for Carlo or something like that. And that's not the way to endear my brothers towards me. But that's what happened.
Yeah, of course. You're the bunso. You're the baby.
I was the baby. Still am the
Yeah,
baby. It's funny.
you're always gonna be the baby.
Always going to be the baby. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same one. I'm the bunso. Bunso means the younger one.
Okay. How old are your siblings?
My brother is, I think he's 44, and then my sister's 43, and then I'm 41.
Okay. Are they
Yeah.
in Canada too? Or
Yeah, all my immediate family, and actually, I have a lot of uncles and aunties here. How about mom and dad? When they moved to Canada, were there relatives or just the two of them?
they were really the first here. And then, as far as I understand it, and then other family members started coming. My dad's brother moved here with his family. Eventually, my mom, a sister and a brother with their families moved. So I did have growing up. I did have aunts and uncles and cousins that I hung out with in my I feel like by the time I was a teenager, there wasn't a whole lot of get-togethers, like large get-togethers in that way, for whatever reason. We were kind of spread out around the lower mainland. And then I don't know, families do start doing their own things and you start losing touch.
Yeah, it's politics.
It could, I don't know. I mean, I definitely know for a lot of Filipino families, like just like many immigrant families, that there's a tightness where family is so important, and no matter what's going on, that everyone's getting together. But yeah, we just kind of drifted apart over time. Yeah.
Yeah, usually that happens because they want to live their own lives or whatever else. Growing up, mom and dad, they're Filipinos, were raised in the Philippines. How was your relationship with them?
Well, at that, I mean, it's good. I mean, our relationship has always been good and solid. Um, I feel like they both worked full-time jobs. I think their priority really was to provide for us four boys. And so from an early age, I was with babysitters I was in daycare at an early age. And in the 80s too, like, the term latchkey kid. I was a latchkey kid. I was very much just running around on my own, starting at a very early age, just doing my own thing. Um, and so, yeah, I would say that, my parents aren't people that I would go to if I had like personal problems or issues. Like we don't have that kind of a relationship, but I love them. They love me. But that's not the relationship that we have.
Did you wish that you have a closer relationship with them?
Um, I mean, that's a good question, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I have I've felt like I've always had like the support I've needed in my life through however that happened. Usually it's friends. Um, but saying that, I suppose it's easy to admire people who have, who they say like, oh, my dad's my best friend or my mom's my best friend. I can tell them anything kind of thing. And it sounds great. It sounds nice. Like my oldest brother, he had kids when he was his first kid when he was 20. So I was an uncle when I was 10 years old. So I have a nephew who's actually as old as my wife is. Um, and I just like watching how they raised them and how they to me they're like buddies, they're friends, my brother and his two boys, and they're so close in that way that they're just friends with each other, and that's pretty admirable and it looks great. But I wouldn't say that I wish anything differently. It's just it is the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, typical immigrant parents that the moved, they're focused on, like you said, providing, and sometimes they forget their kids, taking care of the kids. Because in the Philippines, there's no like hugging and kissing and I love you and whatnot.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
obviously the culture have changed now,
Hmm.
but dude, growing up, there's no I love yous, there's no
Yeah.
hugs. Get out of here.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and I get that too. Like I don't blame my parents for it's not like I think it's a shortcoming of them or anything, but I think
No.
it's a different generation, it's a different culture. It's just that's just the way it was, and being in the Western world or Canada, whatever. I think it's a very yeah, it's a different thing. There's a different way to treat each other. I think right, like or it's just very the relationships are different.
Actually, I started in my family to start hugging and kissing and telling I love you to my parents.
Right. Like, and so where did that come from? Was that a conscious decision that you made to do that?
No, it was a natural thing. I felt like why am I not doing this? I should be doing this, like I want to tell them I love them because I do love them and I'm grateful for what they have done for me. And it become just I start just doing it, and then other people start doing it. My siblings start doing it, and now the younger generation does it too. And the manapo, right?
Yeah, like the sign of respect.
Yeah, do you do it?
No, I've I've only been to the Philippines once when I was 9 years old. So I suppose that could have been a thing I would have done with my titas and titos when I was younger, but I wasn't taught it, I guess. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, well, I know we're going to be getting into this, and it's really what, getting into what my project is about,
get
but
into it.
it's just that the lack of Filipino culture that I had growing up. Um, so I mean, that's a perfect example, right? Where maybe I was taught that at some point, but obviously it wasn't enforced or anything, so I just didn't do it.
Yeah, because if it wasn't forced, you would have done it. Like, so I have my own kids, right? And they are mixed kids. Their mom's Canadian, white Canadian, as they say.
Yeah, this is another topic we can talk about
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I'm curious about this as well. But go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so you know, start having kids. I'm like, I'm Filipino. I am proud Filipino. I will always be proud Filipino. However, I am also proud Canadian, right?
Hmm.
And they're not Filipinos. They're half Filipino, but they're not really Filipinos. They're Canadians, my
Hmm.
kids. But I said I want to keep a value that they will carry on,
Hmm.
and that's one thing I decided. The manapo.
Hmm.
And for the people that doesn't know, in the Philippines, if there's a person that is older than you when you go inside the house or when you see them somewhere, anywhere, you'll you'll hold their hand and put it on your forehead to show respect, right? And I told my boys, I said, hey, listen, if you go to the Filipino house and if you're dealing with the Filipinos, you do the manapo. If you're dealing with the white people side, you don't have to do it because
Nice.
they're not, right?
I have a question for you. If you're if you're the elder in that situation, are you offering your hand, or as the younger person, are they like taking their hand? Like, how does that work?
For me, or how I was raised, you do not offer your hand. Never. Because the person that is younger will have to get your hand.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Okay.
don't be like, put it in the side and don't move it, but like you kind of like meet them halfway
Right.
and then you touch it and then you do the forehead
Okay.
thing.
As the younger person, you're making the first move.
Yeah, because out of
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
respect, right?
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah, so but it's funny now because when there's a when there's a party and my kids they will have to do the thing like whole lineup right, and then they'll be like, "There's so much fans," and I was like, "Imagine in the Philippines we used to do 30 people and more."
Did COVID change this at
No, are you
all?
crazy? We're Filipinos. Get out of here. We gotta do it. It's either that or you get palo.
With that,
You get hit.
with a flying slipper or something?
No,
And
that's the weakest. I don't like people would say like, oh, slippers. I'm like, bro, I will take slippers anytime, bro. So your mom and dad obviously didn't. It seems like they did not show any Filipino culture.
not in a very um a purposeful way, I suppose. It was more, it was more in maybe the food they cooked, which wasn't like 100% Filipino all the time, but definitely it was Filipino cooking. The house would smell. And going to family get-togethers, where the adults were upstairs playing mahjong in the kitchen, and the cousins were downstairs, whatever we were doing, listening to Corey Hart, and playing games or something. Yeah, those were kind of my memories. So, that's from what I understand and hear from other people, like that sounds like a pretty typical like Filipino scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, that's typical. Is the kids are, away, and then usually the men and the women are separated. And it's
Mm,
not decided. It's not like the men will say, "Well, women go over there." No,
hmm.
it just naturally happens.
Yeah.
And the women usually congregate around the kitchen, and the
Hmm.
men just like like play mahjong or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not being sexist or anything. It's just like
Just
the
what
women
happens.
likes going in the kitchen cooking.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I'm proud about Filipino culture is we're not really sexist. In the Philippines, if you ask what a dad is, they will say he's the foundation of the house. And what a mom is the light of the house. She gives light
Mm,
to everything. So like
okay.
they have their own positions and they're both
Hmm.
important. There's no like, oh, that's sexist because this and that. No, dude. Like this is what
Hmm.
I do and this is what you do. And
Right.
mostly Filipino families are actually run by women.
Hmm.
Like day to day decision making. Mostly women runs the show. The dad has an opinion about things, but mostly women runs the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I could that's probably what I experienced in my household mainly. I feel like I mean it could be the fact that my dad is just naturally a very quiet and reserved person, and my mom is the more upfront. Yeah. It's funny though because what I experienced with my parents, I've been, after talking with my brothers a little bit more recently, I would just hear stories that were different than what I experienced. But I mean, just with the fact that they're so much older than me, they just had that many years of experience as being parents. And by the time I came along, I was like, it was probably just a second thought almost, like, they didn't have to worry about it anymore. So I think what I'm saying, I think, is that my brothers wore them out. I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, like there's a joke about that. Like, if the youngest goes up to dad and like the dad will, if you want to play with the chainsaw, do it outside. Something like that. But was mom and dad strict to you growing up?
No, not at all. I don't have memories of being punished much. Like, I think it's related to what I was saying, that my brothers just like I really do this. I was joking, but there's a lot of truth to it. I think they really did wear them down. My brothers, from what I remember and just from the stories I've heard, were so much more the quote unquote troublemakers than I was. I the only time that I remember being like grounded was when I shoplifted and got caught.
My
Um,
boy.
yeah, and thankfully, I was 12 years old maybe, and I got caught shoplifting a cassette tape from Kmart. There was an RCMP officer there, and my parents got called, and they came in, and I was trying to act all cool and stuff before they came, but as soon as they walked in that door, I started bawling. That's what I remember. But that was the last I ever shoplifted. I'd done it. I don't know. Maybe I was doing it for a couple of years before that, just like smaller items, like from the corner store, like candy bars or stickers or that kind of stuff. But yeah, that scared me straight. I'm so glad it happened. But yeah, that is the only time I remember being grounded or really punished. Yeah,
You didn't get hit?
I didn't get hit. No, I
Your
turned out
mom,
okay.
your dad and your mom are saints, bro. I'm
I I don't know. Maybe, I wonder if it's you know, maybe at that time because they'd been in Canada for 4 years to that point.
that
I don't know if my brothers were hit, but I don't know.
yeah, well, you know what, dude? No. If they got hit, you will know.
Yeah.
Because it spreads, Like
Hmm. Right, right, right,
they
right.
show you like, hey, you see this thing? You fool around with me, this was gonna happen with you too.
Mm-hmm.
This obviously tied into your project. Let's talk about your
Yeah.
project Outsiderness, which is I love what you're doing. I'm a big
Thank
fan.
you.
What's the goal and what inspired the project?
Um, what inspired it, I think, is so I live in Nelson, British Columbia. It's a town of like 11,000 people in the mountains. Um, it's not a place that you pass by, you don't pass through it from going from Vancouver to Calgary. So it is a place that you have to be intentional to get to. Um, I'm saying that because I'm just saying it's very isolated. And until recently, it's been very predominantly white. I moved here in 2010, and especially like at that time, it was definitely predominantly white. In the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I started seeing a change in the demographics here. There was a lot more visible minorities, um, Filipinos and Indians, especially. And then I discovered that there was a Filipino group on Facebook they were actually an organized society, the Nelson Filipino Community of BC Society. They're like a registered nonprofit society. And I just started, it intrigued me, and I was why Nelson? Why are there so many Filipinos here all of a sudden? And that intrigued me. And my first thought was actually to do a documentary about this, like digging into like why that question of why here, why now kind of thing. And then I started talking to some members of the community, and the answers were pretty simple and benign. It was like, lots of international students. It's an easy pathway to residency, to citizenship kind of thing. And I was like, oh, well, that's probably, that'll be a boring documentary. So it'd be like a 1 minute documentary. So I don't know. I think what intrigued me at that point was just this. I started like I went to a few events that they held. Like they did. I went to like Christmas caroling that they did. They did a Christmas party. Um, and so whenever was with them, it just really highlighted to me how much that I didn't fit in with them because I didn't speak the language and I don't understand the culture. So like it's hard to relate to them. And these are Filipinos who are new to Canada, of course, and our cultural backgrounds are so different. And I think that's really what started to intrigue me. Just digging into that a little bit because it's like, okay, here are people who come from where I'm from, but I don't fit in at all with them. And then I started to think about my childhood, and I had this very vivid memory of being, I don't know, 9 years old or so. And because where I grew up, everyone was white. I remember being in the shower and scrubbing my skin really hard to like obviously to try to make myself less brown, so that I would fit in more. Despite the fact that no one bullied me, I was not ostracized in any way. I had a lot of friends, and we just played, and there was nothing, different in that sense. Like no one expressed anything towards me in that way. But on some level, even as a child, I knew that I was different, that I wasn't like. And so, yeah, so just thinking about that, and I guess if you extend that into like through my teen years and my into adulthood, it just made me question like how do I fit into Canada in general? I think when pretty much my whole life I've always felt like I'm very Canadian because I was born here, I grew up here, and what I've experienced has been very, quote unquote Canadian. But at the same time, there's something in me that's feels like it doesn't quite fit into, And so that's where like these themes of outsiderness, identity, belonging, that's really started to think on those things and be like, where is there any place where I like 100% feel like I like belong to this, this group or whatever. That's kind of the essence of it, I think.
I love it. Let me just tell you, there is no place that you're gonna be welcome anymore. Like
That might be my conclusion.
because like I'm here, right? Like I've been living here. I'm actually a great example because I've been living here in Canada for 20 years. When I moved here, I was 20. So it's perfect cut, right? Almost. And I feel Canadian. I think I know I'm Canadian. I do all the Canadian stuff except hockey. I don't like playing hockey and stuff.
Hmm.
I went back to the Philippines 2019 and I was like, I am not Filipino. Like,
Wow.
and I was born here. I grew up there. I was a
Yeah.
man when I left there.
Yeah. And you
But
speak the language.
I know the culture. I understand the
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am not Filipino, man. I'm like,
Very, very
I had
interesting.
that reverse, they say it's a reverse culture shock,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Hmm.
But I love that experience because it made me think, like, what are you really,
Hmm.
And then I said to myself, like, I'm water, bro. I'm Filipino and I'm Canadian at the same time.
Hmm. I love that.
Thank you. Having said that, actually, this recently happened to me. You grew up with, white kids. Your friends are mostly white,
Yeah.
relationship and everything.
Hmm.
When you go to a quote unquote white space, let's say, I don't know, I'll give you an example. Recently, I went to a microbrewery,
Hmm.
right? Most of the time, white men are,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's a white space.
White men with beards. Yeah.
You know what I mean? With their flannel jackets and everything.
Yes, of course.
And I do love microbreweries. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a hipster that way.
Same here. Yeah.
I walk in the restaurant and I was like, I haven't felt this in a long time. I walk in, I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, this is a white space. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable, just a little bit,
Hmm.
I'm used
Yeah.
to it, but I'm like,
Yeah.
and I was so shocked. I'm like, I still feel this thing? Like,
Yeah.
I'm good here, dude. I'm okay now, but it's still there.
I totally feel that way. Oh, yeah. I totally get it. And I was born here and raised here, and most for the majority of my life, like most of my friends have been white. My partners have always been white. But yeah, when I walk into a space like that, like you described, my first instinct is like, "Whoa, I'm the brown guy," you know. I was recently talking about this with some friends, but it was a few years ago that my wife and I were down south in the States. We were in Arizona on a road trip, and we were like northern Arizona, like where near the Grand Canyon, and it was colder than we had thought it was going to be, and we were camping in our van, and we're like, oh, we should try to find a warmer place. So we were looking, weather forecasts, and it was looking much warmer, like down south in Tucson, Arizona, which is much closer to it's close to the Mexican border. We're like, maybe we should go down there to get some warmth. But this was when Trump was in power, It's when, all the talk of the wall, you know, and like it was a legit concern for me, like, do I really want to go close to Mexico right now being brown? Like, I don't know if that's, that might have just been in my head, and I don't know if I was overblowing it or whatever, but regardless, it was a thought I had, and I feel like it's a legit thought. But those are the yeah, those are the kinds of thoughts I think that really fascinate me, even though I'm super comfortable, I can still think like that. And it's just for the fact that I have brown skin instead of white skin.
Yeah, very fascinating. Did you say that to your wife? Did you tell her like, "Yo, I
Yeah.
don't think that's a good idea"? What did she say?
She's always very supportive of me. And we've had, I mean, yeah, she didn't really say, yeah, it wasn't even much of a, we just decided not to. We didn't go. Um, but over time we've had some discussions about race and racism and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't until I think it was probably we've been together for going on 13 years now, and I think it wasn't until maybe 6, 7 or 8 years into our relationship where we've kind of had a first talk about this kind of thing about racism and that. And I think she didn't even really know. I think it was a bit of a surprise to her at some of the things I was saying or thoughts that I've had or experiences that I've had. Like it just was, and I think that's very common, like for me and with friends I've had in the past or people in my life who, like white people in my life who just would never even think that I had those experiences or thought like that because I'm just like, I'm just Canadian. And so, yeah, this is all dancing around exactly what the kinds of things that I'm exploring in this project.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Like they have the white privilege, in a very minute way, a very small way. Like they will never understand that feeling. That like
No, no, because
and it's not their fault, obviously.
yeah, of course. Like I don't think anyone should feel guilt about being white. It's
Yeah,
just
no.
that you're white, I'm brown. That's just the way it is. But there is like the way I think about it is like in Canada and the US, I'm sure. Well, Canada gets a lot of its stuff from the US. But I just like white just seems to be the normal, right? Like white is normal in North America. Being white is normal in North America. So if you're not white, you're kind of you're outside of that normal, right? So like no matter how Canadian I am, I'm not white, so I'm still a little bit outside.
Yeah, I like that there was this. I don't know if it was a study or it was just like a social experiment. Uh, they went to this kindergarten or a school for kids, and they asked the kids, which are multicultural kids. They were asked like, "Oh, draw a beautiful princess." There's black girls, there's Asian kids, there's whatever kids there,
Hmm.
and they all drew white princess, all of them.
So sad.
You know what I mean? Like, because it shows that they're programmed to think like, oh, white is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you asked, I think your first question also included like, what are my motivations or hopes out of doing this too? And one of them definitely is diversifying the media landscape, right? It's that representation piece, and it's something I do talk about as well in terms of being a kid of the '80s and growing up where I grew up and listening to the music that I listened to, which at that time was like, mostly like rock and heavy metal. The hockey, all of the television shows that I watched, it was all white families. There was little to no representation. I mean, certainly there's probably very little of Filipino representation today, but even other visible minorities, the representation at that time was really, really low. And so it's just such an important thing, I think. Like because I've always been into music and play music. Um, growing up when I would see yeah, like a brown person in in a rock band on stage. Like it was such a, I don't know, it was such a great feeling, right? It just felt like, oh, I could do this too, kind of thing. And that's like, to me, that is the power of representation, right? Um, have you watched the new Little Mermaid with the
I
black?
was just gonna ask you that. Like, what's your opinion about they
I
changing TV characters and film characters?
I mean, I have no problem with it. I haven't actually watched it, but what I have seen are the reaction videos.
It's garbage,
Of
by the way. The movie I watch
Is
it.
it
It's garbage.
okay? Okay. I probably won't watch it. I probably, but the more important piece though is that I have watched the reaction videos of black moms showing their black daughters this version of the Little Mermaid, and when like the first time it comes on the screen, like the little girls' faces just they light up, and they're just like, well, it's just so excited, and it's just like this brings tears to my eyes to see that kind of thing. And I mean that's what representation is, and that's it's so important that we see ourselves reflected. And for a long time, for a long time, the vast majority has only been white faces reflected back to the public. So yeah, it's changing. Things are changing.
Okay, to that point, do you think that's actual change or just the film companies trying to follow the money?
I think there's a little. It's probably like you're talking about like tokenism, that kind of thing. Um, I think there. It's hard to say, right? I mean, obviously, when it comes to capitalism and making money, that profits are usually the main driving force. But I like to think of the good in people, and I think there are genuinely good people that are working for these places, and they have genuine interests in doing this once they understand what the issues are, and they're willing to start making change and understand how why it's important making change. But at the same time, I also can see, that there probably is like tick box checking, to make sure that I mean, it's so obvious. Sometimes you'll watch a show and it's like, oh, there's the brown person, there's the Chinese person, it's like one of each person is in there. It's like, okay, there's the gay person, there's the, whatever.
United Colors of Benetton.
United Colors of Benetton, exactly. And so, but you know what though? Like, I don't know. I obviously don't like the fact that it has to be done that way, but as a means to an end, as a means to there being more representation, like I don't really think I have a problem with it. I think it's okay. Like however it gets there, if we start seeing like the more that young people are seeing themselves reflected back to them, however they get in those spaces, like I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had a conversation with a actress in Hollywood, and yes, she agrees the point that like, oh, the companies are following money and whatnot. But in the end, we got in. However,
Hmm.
we got in,
Hmm.
and now it's up to us now how what are we gonna do with that space that we just taken, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, like that movie Crazy Rich Asians.
I haven't seen it.
It's an okay movie, you
Uh-huh.
know. It's not as like, oh my god, it's a great movie. It's an okay movie, you know. It's for me. If you ask me what's a movie's about, imagine a rom com of white people, but all the characters are Asians.
Right.
It's exactly the same thing, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Was it a good movie? Again, like I said, it's aight, but we got in,
Yeah, doesn't even matter.
and it doesn't really matter after that. Like at least now they could recognize that, like, oh, you know what? They can actually sell movies. Maybe we can make more.
Yeah. We're
You
seeing
know,
a lot. I mean, we're seeing a lot more of it. I loved Beef. I don't know if you watched Beef on
which one is that?
Netflix. It's a series on Netflix. The entire cast is Asian Americans, but they don't. The thing is they don't play like the Asian person. They're just people. They're just people who happen to be Asian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's one thing. Like it was never like focused on that they were Asian. Where often when you see an Asian person media that's, it's they're the Asian person or whatever, or they're exploiting, some stereotype about their culture or whatever. But none of that happened in the show. It was just an incredible show with incredible acting and storyline and everything. And they just happened to be Asian.
I'll check that out. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
definitely check that out.
Starting, what you're trying to do is very personal,
Hmm.
and you post videos and content on the internet. Have you had comments or action that are hateful or at least negative, and how did you react to it?
Never. I've never had one negative reaction. Um, Maybe it's because it's so small at this point, and I don't know if it'll ever get bigger. But no, the only reactions I've received are mostly other second generation immigrants, some Filipino, but other nationalities hitting me up and telling me how much this is resonating with them. And I think this is a big motivating factor for me too, just to have this kind of validation from other people. And this is partly the reason why I'm doing it this way too, telling this personal story, because it's almost like this has been my experience growing up. But am I the only one? Like, I don't think I'm the only one, but I could be the only one who's feeling like this. But what I think I've shown myself that that's not the case, with so many people being like, I totally get what you're talking about. I have the exact same experience, that kind of thing. And I love that. I love when people reach out to me and share these stories with me.
I love that that's how you're being perceived, and you're not the only one. I promise you. And I would say one of the funniest, I guess like an odd thing is, I had a former guest who's born in Spain. She moved to the Philippines. I think she was 7, and she pretty much grew up in the Philippines. But now she went back to Spain and to live there, right? This girl is Spanish. I mean, she's Spanish, but she's more Filipina than I am. You know what I mean? She posts Filipino content all the time and whatnot. And I always joke with her, like, yo, you're more Filipino than I am. But most of her friends says, you're not Filipina, you're Spanish. And I'm like, no, her heart, yes, she looks Spanish, but her heart is Filipino.
Yeah, I see that a lot because I started following Instagram accounts, Filipino, like One Down Media, if you know them. There's the Filipinos in the Six podcast and Instagram account and other accounts. And I see a lot of those kinds of comments, like questioning like who's Filipino and who's not, and lots of negativity. I feel like, I mean, I'm not to say that it's never going to happen, that I'm never going to have negative feedback or anything hateful towards me. But I feel like one thing that I do, or in terms of approaching this from a very personal perspective, is that that's all I'm doing. I'm just sharing my own story. And like, how can you argue with that? You know what I mean? Like, how can you come back at me when this is my story? Like, this is just me sharing my story. I'm not trying to preach anything. I'm not trying to change anyone's minds of anything, I'm just trying to share my story and hoping that it connects with some people and maybe can inspire someone else to share their story. And, I think, like, I've heard from, other, like, even my partner or other white friends or family members, like on my partner's side, where they're probably learning some things about me and learning things about my experiences growing up. And, I think if it can be like an education in that way too, because I could totally understand, if you're white, like, why would you think about this kind of stuff? It's not your experience. Like, why would you think about this stuff? But if it can help, anyone just understand what like the immigrants experience might be like, what the second generation, specifically in my case, what the second generation immigrants experience is like, or could be like, or at least it's one person's, experience, then, that's great.
You mentioned your middle age, like I am as well. Why is it important to you find your Filipinoness, and why now?
Yeah. Um, Good question. I think the why now probably is, well, like I said, it was really inspired. I think it was a timing thing in terms of this Filipino community that um, all of a sudden exploded in my community. But I can imagine if I was 25 at the time, like that probably wouldn't have interested me. There's something about being the age I am right now, and I assume that as you get older, you just reflect more. I think. Um, I wouldn't call it a midlife crisis, but it's definitely a midlife curiosity or something where I'm at a time and place in my life where I feel like learning about this stuff is important to me. And like so much of stuff, that I've been doing like a lot of learning as well about, like indigenous issues in Canada and or more specifically where I live. Like I as a videographer, I've worked with indigenous groups. And so understanding more about like the history of Canada and that whole history, it's like, and then learning about Filipino history, like there's just so many parallels when it comes to colonization and I don't know, everything's just kind of flowing into each other right now and colliding with each other. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that really answers the question. It's just, if not now, when, I guess. It's just the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you balance feelings of privilege and gratitude for your life while acknowledging the impact of systemic racism on your experiences?
Whoa, where did that question come from? What a question. I definitely understand and acknowledge how privileged and fortunate I have been, am today. I've had everything that I've wanted. We've never lacked for anything. So a lot of gratitude to my parents, a lot of gratitude to, yeah, just, yeah, I've had it good. I won't lie. I've had it good.
You're almost white, you know?
Yeah, almost white privilege.
Almost,
Um,
almost. It's just
yeah,
the skin,
but
you
not
know? You
quite. It's
didn't
just
rub it enough,
no.
dude.
If oh man, if I was white for sure, yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd be that privileged white man for
You will
sure.
dominate, dude.
I would dominate
Dominate.
the privileged white man space. Um, but yeah, but no. So yeah, yeah, I feel like I can acknowledge it and I can recognize it, but I can still understand as well that there still is systemic racism, you know? Because it's never just about me. It's never just about an individual. It's a whole system we're talking about, right? We're talking about society. And so even though, you know, they're the people who say like, oh, I worked hard my whole life. I didn't benefit from anything. It's just, this was all blood, sweat, and tears of me, like, I I worked too. I worked hard. I feel like I did my thing. I was never like just handed things. Well, that's not true. I've been handed things, but um, overall, I've worked to be where I am. But I would never go so far as to say like this is because of me, like just me. I did this on my own kind of thing, right? Like we are propped up by our environment, by our society. So yeah, I don't know. Did I even get close to answering that?
You
I
did all
probably
right. That's all right. Don't worry about that. By the way, where is your family from in the Philippines?
Manila area.
Manila. Everyone's from Manila. You know that?
Everyone seems to be from Manila. My mom was born in Tacloban City. I know that.
There you go. That's the real
Um, s-
answer.
there you go. My dad was born in I believe he was born in the Manila area. I know they lived in San Pablo,
Laguna.
Laguna. Yeah, I think my dad was maybe born in Quezon City,
Quezon City?
maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
I
So
could be.
that's
Don't
the
quote me on
city.
that. I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, for sure. I know you went home when you're like what, 8 or 9?
9, yeah.
Have you gone back?
Not yet. Um, no. I mean, I was 9 when I was there with my parents. And it was what it was, like at that age, it's hard to appreciate, I think I probably just wanted to go back home where my comforts were and my toys were and my skateboard was. Um,
Again, you're half
um,
white, you know?
yeah. But I mean, it was a great experience though, like just to be there and see how things were. I mean, obviously it would be very different because that was almost 40 years ago now. I've been talking with my oldest brother, who's 10 years older than me, about making a trip to the Philippines when I turn 50 and he turns 60. I think that would be a really cool thing to do. And it, gives us some time to plan it. So that's slowly, that's, planted the seeds. So we'll see what comes of it. So I may be back in the Philippines, in the next couple of years.
I'm excited, man. I'm telling you, you might say, like, oh, I'm not from here, I'm not Filipino, I'm Canadian. When that ancestor's spirit starts talking to you, and you'll be like, oh, I am from here. It's just, I'm not originally from here, but I am from here.
Yeah,
You
I would
know?
be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I will have that reaction, but I'm curious about it. Yeah, that would be such an interesting experience to have.
I hope you have that. I remember when I went back, I haven't even thought about the Philippines. I think about it, but like, do I miss it? Nah, not really. I miss my family, but that's it, right?
Hmm.
And I always remember like came home and it was like, I always say that it was like seeing my town was like seeing that ex-girlfriend of yours
Hmm.
that is beautiful and you broke up with her not because you don't love her anymore, it's just because circumstances. And
Wasn't
then
working
you
out.
and then you come back and be like, oh, she's still pretty. She still got it,
Mhm.
you know? And it was just like, oh, this is a nice feeling.
Yeah,
And
but
and
no
then
regrets.
no regrets, no. I was actually talking to my mom this morning about like, would I choose to live in the Philippines over living in Canada? Let's say I'm rich in the Philippines, right? And I'm okay
Mm-hmm.
here in Canada, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
this situation in Canada. I said to my mom, like, without a doubt, Canada, without a doubt,
Hmm.
you know.
Why?
It's just life is just better here, which is that's double edged sword to be honest. But
Hmm.
trust me, coming from my background being poor, it's
Hmm.
nice here. you know,
Yeah.
it's just. But to answer your question, it's just healthcare is awesome.
Hmm.
You know, it's convenient here, and I feel like there's more opportunities in a sense. Like, yes, you can say, "Oh, you're brown, you won't get the job because of all this."
Hmm.
Dude, if you work for a fast food company, fast food chain, and own a car, you're doing all right, bro.
Hmm.
In the Philippines, you could be a manager of a bank, and you're
And
still
not own a
taking
car.
jeepney.
Right. Right.
You barely can afford a car.
Yeah.
So
It's all
that's just,
relative, isn't it?
you know, I have this mantra when it's winter in Quebec, you know how it gets cold here and the snow is thick and it goes to your back and you're just like, you're freezing. Because I'm brown. I'm not designed for this weather, like you. As much as you're Canadian, it gets cold. Your body's not designed for the cold, right?
Hmm.
I always tell myself, like, starvation or this, meaning the bad weather. I always choose the bad weather.
Yeah. Right. Because you like food too much.
I love food. Yeah, food is alright, man. But you know what? I still love Filipino food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've through this project, I've done a couple of cooking things where I had someone come over and cook me
Bistec.
bistec. Yeah. And then I did a chicken adobo with some, I cooked that with, I cooked it myself actually from a recipe on the internet. So I'm trying to get these Filipino cooking experience. I do love Filipino food.
Well, it
I
has
miss,
taste.
I know, was it yesterday or the day before? It was like National Lumpia Day or something. I miss my mom's lumpia. Um, yeah. Yeah, one thing I was gonna say too about one thing I love about Canada, what I love about especially where I live now is space. I love space. I was just talking about this yesterday with my wife that um where I live, it's only 11,000 people here. There's just space. Like in general Canada, it's so big, but there's only, like 30 something million people who live here. And you think about the US, it's 10 times that in a smaller landmass. And there's just space here. And I can imagine, China, India, other nations that are just so densely packed, and like the Philippines, and just the constant din of everything that's going on and people buzzing around. It's
Traffic.
like how much I appreciate silence and quietness. That's why I can't imagine living anywhere else.
Yeah, I love that you said about space because my aunt and my uncle visited from the Philippines to Canada last year, and my uncle could not believe how big Canada is.
Yeah.
And
It's incredible.
he just saw Ontario, a little bit of Ontario, Quebec, and it's like this country is massive. I'm like,
It is. It's hard to appreciate. In 2016, my wife and I drove across Canada to Newfoundland and back. So until you like have like like traverse the country, that in that way, it's hard to appreciate just how big it is
and beautiful.
and beautiful and varied. Yeah, like people make fun of their prairies all the time, but it's beautiful. You go
Yeah,
through
those
there, it's
people are dumb.
gorgeous.
Like you just obviously, if you live in the prairies, it becomes normal. And
Yeah,
anyway, like if you live in the Caribbean, it becomes normal.
yeah, that's right.
You know,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
okay, here, great example. In my town, there's a waterfall, right?
Hmm.
I grew up in this waterfall, dude. Like
Hmm.
we go this waterfall all the time.
Yeah,
And I brought my kids, and they could not believe it exists. Like,
yeah.
oh my God, this is so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And me, my spoiled, privileged side, I'm like, yeah, it's just waterfall. There's nothing, no special about it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like you think about, you talk about your poverty growing up and you had access to this waterfall and this like and you could imagine like how much would a tourist pay to come to this waterfall? I think about this all the time where I live because I live on a really large, beautiful lake and this is going back to the gratitude thing too. Like there's not every time I go out like in our canoe or whatever, walking, just looking around and being like, this is incredible. Like there are people from all over the world who would pay massive amounts of money to come and experience what I get to live in, you know? And gratitude for that every day.
100%. Have you spoken to mom and dad about being thankful for making that trek from Philippines to Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking more and, I've been learning more about their story and learning more about that side of things. And, I've definitely said thank you. Maybe I should be a little more, there needs to be more though. You're making me want to like call them up right now and say thank you again.
As you should, dude. As you should. Yeah, you gotta call mom and dad.
Yeah.
Dad, you don't have to call dad. Drop him a text. Mom, definitely call mom.
That's funny. Yeah.
Do you
I'll-
think through this project you have got closer with your family?
yeah, I definitely have. Yeah, like I said, I've spoken a lot more with my parents, and just learning about family history and just having that interest in this and in them and learning more of their stories. Even stories like what their experiences were growing up in the Philippines, and their experiences with their families, and then of course moving here. And yeah, and I have plans to talk more with my brothers. I've spoken a lot with my oldest brother. We're the closest in terms of connection wise. I think we relate the most out of the four of us, me and him. And so I've spoken with him quite a bit about some of this stuff, and I'm looking forward to speaking to my other two brothers about this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it definitely has made me feel closer. Yeah, for sure.
How long do you think is the project going to run?
The plan is to shoot until the end of the summer and then go into post production and finish everything around the end of November. So I don't totally have like a distribution plan yet, but I'm thinking I'm going to, try to submit it to film festivals, do local screenings, like where I live, and then maybe if there's other small communities that would be interested in screening it, I'd like to do that. And then at some point I'll have it up online and
Amazing. Can't wait.
available. Yeah.
I think we're there, but I want to close out with this question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What do you hope viewers will gain or learn from watching your documentary?
I think I touched on this. I think I mean, number one, this is my intended audience are the second generation immigrants, the ones who will share and resonate with the experiences that I'm talking about and the conversations that I'm having in the doc. So I think for them, I think like me, because if I'm not sharing this, if I'm not creating these conversations, I feel like I'm in isolation. I feel like maybe I'm the only one who's experienced this, and I don't really know if others have. So I think, hopefully it just opens that up and people can be like, oh, so I'm not the only one. And so maybe the answer to that is community. It's feeling less alone in that experience. And then the secondary thing I think is just kind of as an educational piece for people who might not understand what it is like for someone like me to growing up here, right? Yeah,
Definitely.
might open some eyes. Who knows?
Hey, it will for sure. May it open one or 1,000. As long as you got one, that's what matters.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. Yeah, I'm not precious about my expectations in terms of like how many people are going to see this and whatever. I'm creating this. It's kind of an experiment for me, so I'm not trying to be too precious about it, and I'm just going to do my best, and whatever comes out comes out and
Amazing. Can't wait.
available. Yeah.
How can viewers engage and contribute on the ongoing conversation that sparked this documentary?
I think I would say the best ways are Instagram at outsiderness_doc and through my Substack, outsiderness.substack.com. And if they want to email me at carlo@carloalcos.com, I would love to hear from anyone who kind of is resonating with the project and feels like they want to connect and share their story or say hi, whatever.
Definitely. Carlo, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for reaching out again and showing interest.
100%.
I really appreciate you.
For sure. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Again, Carlo, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.